Hello, you're watching TVP World Talks. I'm Inash Levinsky. US President Donald Trump has sent shockwaves across the Far East with his sudden decision to scale back routine joint drills with South Korea. In a social media post, Trump claimed his good relations with North Korean dictator ensured the regime remained unthreatening and respectful, while also berating Seoul for rebuffing his requests for support over the Iran war. Are joint exercises really sending an inappropriate signal to Pyongyang, or is Trump using this to push a new diplomatic agenda? Joining us here today is Edward Howell, lecturer in politics at New College, University of Oxford. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you very much.
Right, so let's begin with the most fundamental issue. How serious is this? How much are these exercises expected to be scaled back?
Well, we don't know the full details about this, but I think what's important to remind viewers is that this is not the first time that calls for these US-South Korea joint exercises to be scaled back have taken place. We only need to go back to the first Trump administration, particularly to 2018, when Trump and Kim Jong Un were getting ready to start their dialogue, and after they had their first summit meeting in Singapore in June that year, to see evidence of scaled down US-South Korean exercises and even suspended exercises. Trump even suspended some of these exercises after the Singapore summit. I think that what's important to bear in mind, however, is that since 2018, the geopolitical situation around the Korean Peninsula has changed and it's worsened. There is a growing security risk facing not just South Korea, also Japan, but on the Korean Peninsula, we have North Korea, we have North Korea's newfound alliance with Russia, Pyongyang pledging to send tens of thousands more troops to assist Russia's war against Ukraine, in addition to the already 15,000 troops it had sent, and also China, which is one of the biggest enablers of the Ukraine war, and which continues to help North Korea evade sanctions. So all of these actors are working together. So for South Korea, the security environment has changed since 2018 and not for the better.
Right, so this hardly looks like the regime being unthreatening and respectful, unless the Trump administration wants to adopt a sort of fragmented approach. Like, they look at the individual theaters, the individual regions, and say, well, from the perspective of this particular situation, this is not so bad. But is this really the right approach? Because obviously, like you've mentioned, it ignores the fact that when viewed from a distance, we clearly see North Korea being involved in a bigger project to undermine Western democracies, this so-called axis of upheaval, right?
Indeed, and as I argue in my upcoming book, A New Axis of Upheaval, North Korea, Russia, China, Iran, these countries are working together, and we look to see a growing solidification of their ties, even if they're not in any formalized alliance. I think on the part of the Trump administration, one of the reasons driving these statements from the president himself could have been Trump's desire to strengthen his interpersonal relationship with Kim Jong Un. Trump
Is it still possible?
Last year in October. Well, Trump tried last year in October to meet with Kim Jong Un and on the sidelines of the APEC summit held in South Korea, and no meeting materialized. Now, we might say that North Korea has everything it needs and is getting everything it needs from Russia. Therefore, why should Kim Jong Un meet with the US? But I think a meeting is still possible, particularly after the US midterms. We know that Trump has said to his South Korean counterpart, Lee Jae-myung, when they first met in the Oval Office last August, that a meeting with Kim Jong Un was something he wanted to do, and something the South Korean president supported Trump doing. And we also know that on the part of Kim Jong Un, and this is the most important point here, Kim Jong Un has little to lose from a meeting with Trump. He can offer no nuclear concessions. He can continue to benefit from the support from Russia and China at the moment. And if he can get some kind of acceptance, whether implicit or explicit, of North Korea's status as a nuclear weapon state, this is Kim Jong Un's ultimate goal in all of this, then it will be a victory for Kim Jong Un, and it will be worth doing.
What about the Trump administration? What does it really have to gain here? Because we do remember the previous peace process in the Korean Peninsula, and that one, of course, started auspiciously, but later on nothing came out of it. Back then, these signals, scaling down exercises, this could have been excused as sort of diplomatic messaging. Even right now, South Korea is trying to downplay this. Apparently, what they said was that basically they believe the peace process should go ahead, that they do hope there is going to be some sort of de-escalation. But do you really think that it is worth it from Washington's perspective?
I think that on the part of the second Trump administration, the situation is very different to in the first Trump administration. Any future US-North Korea dialogue looks to be largely between Trump and Kim Jong Un this time around, rather than between large groups of people. The two leaders have met before. The risk for South Korea is that South Korea becomes marginalized in any dialogue. During the first Trump administration, South Korea was essential as a messenger between Washington and Pyongyang. Washington and Pyongyang had not engaged in such levels of talks before. But now, in 2026, because Kim and Trump have met before, the need for South Korea to play such a large role could be seen as less necessary. And therefore, this poses a risk for Seoul that any talks that happen between Trump and Kim in the future, whether after the US midterms, if they don't turn out in the US administration's favor or otherwise, risks putting South Korea to one side. And at the moment, we've got to remember that the South Korean government under Lee Jae-myung has expressed its desire to reconcile ties with the North.
But what about the Iran angle? Trump has made it abundantly clear that he was not satisfied with the way some of America's allies responded to the campaign against the Iranian regime. And he mentioned that again expressly in his post, saying that basically South Korea was approached about helping out in this affair, but they said, and I quote, "no thanks," right? So is the US administration in a way justified in this sort of behavior, perhaps, or at least with the sort of signaling that, look, this is a two-way street, and even if it is, then is cutting back on exercises the proper thing to do to express that desire for reciprocity in relations as allies?
Well, this clearly reflects how the Trump administration, or how Trump himself views alliances. This is something he's articulated for many years, many decades, even long before he entered the world of politics. What's important to bear in mind here is that we do not live in a world akin to the immediate post-war, post-Second World War era, in which the US was basically funneling money around the world and other countries were very much dependent on the US. The US-South Korea alliance, of course, is a bedrock of security on the Korean Peninsula, a bedrock of security in East Asia. It's a core part of the US's hub and spokes model in East Asia of strong bilateral, robust alliances. And the Korean Peninsula is not just a South Korean issue, it's a US security issue as well. I think on the part of South Korea has already increased its defense spending. It's pledging to strengthen its own indigenous forms of defense and military capabilities. This is a very positive maneuver, and this needs to continue because in today's geopolitical environment, all around the world, countries are competing for US assistance. We saw this earlier this year when Patriot and THAAD missile defense systems, parts of these systems were redeployed from South Korea to assist in the conflict in the Middle East with respect to Iran. So I think this could be an opportunity for South Korea as well to think about what it can do to modernize the alliance in
could it
itself,
lead
even though
proliferation as well. I mean, some in South Korea are advocating for Seoul to basically build its own nuclear capability.
Well, I mean, the question of South Korea's independent nuclear development is very varied depending on whom you ask. It might seem popular if you ask members of the public, but it's very much not when you ask South Korean elites. The question of South Korea's nuclear proliferation really depends. I don't see this as very likely in the immediate future. It really depends on actually not only on what the US does, not only on the North Korean threat, which is the most immediate threat facing Seoul, but also what Japan does as well. I think there is a real risk that if one of these countries in Northeast Asia decides to develop their own independent nuclear deterrent, the other one will follow. And these are concerns that are well known, not only to South Korea, but also to governments in Northeast Asia.
And finally, a very quick question. Do you think that this sends a terrible signal to other staunch allies of the US, which are being praised for their involvement and their dedication, and all of a sudden you could have a single tweet from a member of the Trump administration basically downgrading the degree of mutual cooperation or support?
I think we need to remember that, firstly, this is how Trump views alliances, that fundamentally we are yet to see any active US disengagement from East Asia. Trump has said numerous times about the withdrawal of US troops. We haven't seen any. And even if we do see the withdrawal of a few thousand US troops, such as to assist in a Taiwan contingency or otherwise, I think this is also a wake-up call for South Korea, for Japan, and for US allies around the world of the need to do two things. Firstly, to strengthen their ties with the US. That's extremely important, particularly in the longer term. And secondly, to try and take greater financial and their own responsibility for their defence. I do not view these two goals as in contradiction with each other.
Edward Howell was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.
Thank you.
And I'm Elash Lewiński. You're watching TVP World. Please do stay with us.